And it's live now.
Lovely. Okay, right. Give me a moment and I'll just bring this up. Oh no! Oh, hold on. Just, very sorry, chat, ladies and gentlemen. I got the wrong slide briefly. Right. There we are. Right. Is that working? Have we got everything? Excellent. Right. Well, we shall begin. Thank you, everyone, for coming along to this evening's talk. This is a bit of an experiment, really. We've got both the Institute members from our excellent North of England Institute of Mining and Mechanical Engineers, and we're bringing together some undergrads from a various number of departments at Durham University. So this is fantastic, and this is and our talk tonight is jointly with the Arthur Holmes Geological Society of the Geology Department at Durham University, and this is going to be on Station 8, Signy Island, Life in the Banana Belt with the British Antarctic Survey by Mark Sanders. Just a few notices on YouTube who haven't heard of our institute before. We're based in Newcastle, and we've got a lot of wide range of activities that we put on. We have monthly lectures in Newcastle during normal operating times, but we're also putting together a wider range of student-focused talks. So we've had a couple of career talks already, again in conjunction with the Arthur Holmes Society, so some of you might come along to those, and we're always looking for ideas. So if you would like to put anything on, do get in touch. We've also got our excellent annual dinner where there's ladies and gentlemen of a variety of professional backgrounds, both geologists, engineers and others, so do come, if you become a member you'll get an invite to that. We're also putting on a range of social events at some point, and we usually do a summer local field trip, and hopefully we will one day have an international field trip to these mines in Poland. Our younger members or early career group, it's part of the North of England Institute of Mining and Mechanical Engineers, not just mining engineers, not just mechanical engineers. It's a range of students from a range of science disciplines. So we're always looking for people to join the institute. It's only £10 for a student membership per year, and you can help us run more events like this with our YMG group. We recently had the Young Persons Lecture Competition with some absolutely excellent talks, and of course we're always looking for people to help organise field trips, get involved with our journal, editing that, so that's particularly a PhD student activity would be excellent, and we're hoping to one day have some outreach activities when we can start getting out and about again. Previous YMG events we've had during Michaelmas term, it was contemporary geotechnical engineering with a chap from Dunelm Geotechnical. Some of you might know Dr. Phil Heron as well. He was recently at Durham, and he was giving a talk on prison outreach and teaching in northeast prisons. And of course we've got our additional lecture this evening. So if you are interested, either email myself or go to mininginstitute.org.uk/membership. If you're an undergrad, it's a standard £10. If you're over 25, you can become a full member with M-NEMI postnomials. And if you're a postdoc or staff, then also there's further opportunities to get involved as well. And as ever, if anyone's interested in joining the Institute, we have a wide variety of excellent membership benefits, including annual dinner, our golf competition, field trips, publications, events, and of course our postnomials and the opportunity to get involved with us. So again, just go to mininginstitute.org/membership. Quick notice on our next Institute talk is going to be given by a professor from Newcastle on how you can build a house using bacteria, which should prove to be really interesting. More information on that via Facebook and Twitter. For those of you at Durham, you'll probably hear about the Durham Energy Institute conference we'll be running towards mid-April. So we're just finalising the last few speakers for that with the Minister, Secretary of State, I believe, and more information will be sent out soon. And don't forget, follow us online on Twitter, Facebook. We've got our fantastic YouTube channel where you can catch up with all our talks. And of course, just go and look up our website for more event information. So I'm now going to hand you over to Alice to do the introduction. She's the one who's been instrumental in organising this talk for us tonight. She's done all the emailing and all the setting up for this, and so I shall hand you over to Alice.
Thanks, Andrew, for the introduction. And yeah, I'm just going to introduce Mark. I'd like to say thank you very much, Mark, for coming and agreeing to do this talk for us. So to introduce Mark, in 1982, he graduated from Bell College, now the University of West Scotland, with a higher national diploma in biology. Between 1982 and 1986, Mark worked as a biological field assistant for the British Antarctic Survey in Antarctica. He was responsible for the biological and chemical monitoring of freshwater Antarctic lake ecosystems as part of a longer-term research programme. Following work with BAS, Mark became a rock and drilling fluids analyst for Schlumberger Research. And then over the next 33 years, he worked in a variety of roles for the company, from senior laboratory technician to UK laboratory manager, technical engineer, and finally as a research scientist. In 2019, Mark became a principal scientist for the company, and he retired from this last year. Mark also has an honours degree in chemistry from the Open University. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to you, Mark.
Excellent. Thank you, Alice, for the introduction. I'll just get my show on the road. Yeah, let's see if I can share screen. I'm hoping everybody can see my screen now.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, then. Okay. So you're looking at Station H, Signy Island, on a dingle day, summer, around January or February, probably around 1985. This one, but I'll set the scene first of all. So it's life in the banana belt with the British Antarctic Survey. So I'm sure all of you are aware of what the Antarctic looks like, but I'll just give you a quick grounding on where we're heading tonight. East Antarctica, West Antarctica. Antarctica is separated by the Transantarctic Mountains, Antarctic Peninsula, and we're heading to the South Orkney Islands. Right at the top end between the confluence between the Weddell Sea in the south and the Scotia Sea in the north. You're ever wondering what the UK looks like in comparison? We can get 58 UKs into the area of the Antarctic, so quite a big place. British Antarctic Territory. Looks after, as Signy's in the British Antarctic Territory, which makes up probably 12% of the surface area of the Antarctic. This really has been on the go since 1908, if I remember correctly, when it was first mentioned, but really kicked in a few decades later. So Britain has had a big involvement in the Antarctic over many years. You know, starting with Scott of the Antarctic and Shackleton. I'm sure you've all heard of those guys. And after World War, in fact, towards the end of World War II, an earlier organization took a real interest in the Antarctic, primarily for political reasons, Operation Tavarin, and went through various stages over the years. But a lot of the early exploration was really done in the 50s, and a number of bases were set up, and Antarctica really was surveyed for peaceful purposes. Now, I started off this presentation in the title Station H, Signy Island, but there are a number of other bases with different code names. Probably wondering why the code names. Well, in the early days, communication was all done by shortwave and Morse code. And it was often easier just to use the Morse code letter to identify where you're calling from. So, but a lot of these names, a lot of these letters did stick for a long time. Signy Island base actually eventually just became Signy Research Station. But you can see that, well, in fact, there are a lot more than the Admiralty Bay station after that. But today, the British Antarctic Survey really maintains a couple of bases north in South Georgia, not shown. Halley Bay, which I'm sure you've all heard about. Rothera is a big base for the Antarctic Survey. Fossil Bluff is a summer-only component, and Signy Island still being run as a research base. So sea ice is a big part of what happens in the Antarctic, how it affects temperatures and everything else. So summer ice edge is really falls short of the South Orkney Islands. So, and this has a big impact on the temperature, overall temperature of this area. So, and in wintertime, that extends to north of Signy, and it becomes part of a more of a continental climate. In the summertime, it's a maritime Antarctic climate, much warmer than the main continent. Temperatures on the coast can be around -10 of the mainland continent, whereas on Signy, they can be a lot warmer. 5-10 degrees is not unusual. But an interesting point to note is the ice edge, the winter ice edge. In 2020, last year, it was estimated from satellite data at just over 13 million square kilometers. The Antarctic continent itself is just over 14 million square kilometers. So, it's almost double the surface area in winter, and with a significant reduction in summer conditions. But today we're going to be focusing on the South Orkneys. So where we are, Coronation Island is the biggest island there in the group, about probably 25 miles wide. Laurie Island's close by, probably 30, 40 miles away to the east, with Signy Island south of Coronation Island, quite protected actually. And the red stars, which I'm hoping are visible, show the Signy Island base. And also, we can also see Orcada Space, which is our neighbors, which were our neighbors, organized by or run by Argentina. Okay, so I spent quite a few years on Signy, in fact, two and a half years to be exact, on Signy Island, from 1982 to 1985. It wasn't a huge island to be on for that length of time, I've got to say, but there was a lot of interest there, as you will see. It's pretty much dominated by an ice cap, the McLeod Glacier, and unfortunately that's been receding over the last few years. Geologically, I know there are a few geologists amongst you. Geologically, it's metamorphic rock primarily. Geologists spent quite a long time there in the early days, but soon abandoned it to the biologists, with Signy eventually becoming a biological station, so primarily. The largest point on Signy is Tioga Hill at just under 300 meters in height. But there's what was my interest specifically on Signy was it was covered in lakes, freshwater bodies, from ligotrophic to mesotrophic to a few eutrophic lake systems. And these were more like tarns, little mountain tarns, mainly. The largest one being probably 42,000 square meters, something like that. Not too big, not too big.
He's made a mess of that.
Hello, I've got some interference here. Okay, before Signy became a research station, it was actually a whaling station, and whaling really started around 1911 in the area. This photograph, I was very lucky to find this photograph from 1925. It's the old factory ship Orwell, parked in Borge Bay with Jane Peak of Signy Island in the background there. Rather shockingly, the number of whales caught between 1911 and 1930, there were actually just under 2,000 from the shore on Signy, but if you take into account pelagic numbers and from the South Orkneys and also those from the South Shetlands, unfortunately over 118,000 whales were slaughtered. Bit of a shocker, that one. I'm glad it doesn't happen today. 1947 onwards, that's when the science really started happening on Signy, with the first wintering base, with half a dozen people, Richard Laws, who eventually became the director of the British Antarctic Survey, or what was to become the British Antarctic Survey. And it developed over the years, eventually getting dogs. 1963, this is Tonsberg House, which actually was still there, or in the 1980s when I was there in a form. And base numbers were going up. So it had become a properly established winter station. This is what Signy looked like when I was there. This was what was known affectionately as the big plastic hut. Actually had the foundation stone placed by Sir Vivian Fuchs of the Transantarctic fame, believe it or not. And this held up to 30 people during the summer, and winter up to 16 people. But you'll see around, I'll point out around still bits of the old whaling station. And in fact, you can't see it so well from here, but there's an old wooden plan that they used to drag the whales onto. That was still in existence in those days. So it was quite a fine place to be. But you can see from this scene, you can see why it is often referred to, Signy is often referred to as being in the banana belt. Glorious summer day, Coronation Island in the background, and beautiful conditions on Signy. In 1996, wintering unfortunately stopped on Signy, and it became a summer-only station. Part of the reason for that was the seal numbers. Over the decades, the seal population has been increasing, and it got to the point where the seals were just destroying a lot of the scientific spots, and a decision was made to convert it to a summer-only station and move a lot of the biological work to Rotherham, in fact. But a new base was installed in 2003, and this is pretty much what we have today. And we can take up to, BAS can take up to 10 people at this base currently. Signy, unlike some place in the Antarctic, does not have access to an airfield, which means you have to get there by boat. This was on my voyage down to the Antarctic on a boat called the John Biscoe, much smaller than today's David Attenborough. I'm sure you've been looking at it on the news. Quite an adventurous trip. You'll eventually run into summer pack. Earlier I showed you the summer pack line, but you will, it's not continuous. Often these things you get lots of open water, and there's a lot of open pack even north of Signy, certainly in the early part of summer. And it's a case of navigating your way through and getting to Signy. Unfortunately, it's not always ice-free when you get to Signy. This is quite rare. This is known as a sea ice relief. This is the first boat in for the summer, and the summer could start from the end of November, but it's usually early December. And you can see here it's very physical, loading equipment onto the ice, skidoos, take it to shore, or if you've got open water boats, essentially all your supplies dumped where you can in some cases. Ideally, we'd use a jetty, which is there, but it's very much a case of all hands on deck when you're bringing in the new supplies for the summer and for the winter and coming winter, and also sending out some samples and whatever personnel on the way out. So if you're very lucky though, occasionally we had help from the Navy. The Navy run a survey vessel, Endurance, and occasionally if that's in the area, they will offer assistance in terms of helicopter assistance. And we were lucky on this day to get some help. Once everything's at the base, of course, you've got to make sure everything is there. Losing one box could have a big impact on the science or an individual who may have had some stuff sent in. So there is a consequence to losing a lot of stuff. So, great care is taken on making sure you have everything accounted for. Again, very physical. Once you've sorted yourself out, all the new recruits on base have to have some basic training. This one's basically putting out a fire, learning to put out a fire. Fire is the biggest risk in the Antarctic, more so when you live in a plastic hut, I've got to say. So we all get trained on use of fire extinguishers, fire practices, and we had used to have monthly practices with breathing apparatus as well. And it was very important for us to make sure everyone was accounted for and these sort of things too. So we'd practice rescuing from cliff faces. You're basically on your own here. There's no calling up the air sea rescue or whatever. If anybody has an accident, you really got to deal with it yourself. So we do practice we do have these sort of drills. We used to have these sort of drills on a fairly regular basis too, to make sure that everybody knew what to do. We had a doctor on base, and usually quite a few first aiders too. Crevasses, big problem in the Antarctic. Many of us had no experience on ice before heading south, but we certainly got some when we were down there. Tents, having to learn how to put up a pyramid tent, very important. And these tents, which we'd use in the field, either for work or for leisure, have not changed a huge amount since the old pyramid tent days of even Scott's era, as you can see, but they're well proven, hardy designs. And each of these tents can take normally up to three people, but in an emergency, quite a few more. They're quite large in size. And you can do your own cooking and everything else in them. Once you've sorted your base out and done your training, you might even escape for a day out. This is from the top of Signy, probably about 900 meters, looking over to the west side of Coronation Island here in the Sandy Fjord Peaks. And in the far left, you'll see the Inaccessible Islands, probably 25 miles away from Signy. So you get some idea of summer landscapes here. Very beautiful here, but this is the top of the McLeod Glacier. Temperatures in the Banana Belt can be quite variable. Signy being a subantarctic, maritime Antarctic island, can have quite big swings. The worst case in the summer was it dropped to -7 once. But Signy takes the record for having the warmest temperature in the Antarctic region. That's any body south of 60 degrees south, where it went up to 19.8 degrees Celsius, which was a real rarity because most times in summer, 10 degrees, that's probably not normal. Or 5 to 10 degrees is normal. But we did have a break here for a game of cricket on what was the whaling plan, where they used to drag the whales up in times past. But you can see where, as I said, where Banana Belt came into play again too. So Signy is a haven for wildlife, I've got to say. I will say I'm not going to have so many wildlife pictures during this presentation, as we don't have a huge amount of time. If you're interested in wildlife, I suggest you go to BBC and have a look at a David Attenborough film. But no surprises here. But we had lots of penguins in Signy. These are Gen 2 penguins, probably 300 pairs on Signy. But the most populous penguin was probably chin straps, which are these guys here, probably 80,000 pairs. We also had adalies and macaronis, which I previously a few dozen pairs of macaronis as well. This bird here is a sheathbill. It's an Antarctic land bird. It's the only one that doesn't have webbed feet. But you'll find these guys, not the prettiest of birds, I will say, but they would be often seen around the penguin colonies. They survived on the detritus there. Also, quite a few bird of prey, McCormick's skua. These would also be found often around penguin colonies. I quite like this picture, not just for the bird, but also you get a good idea of what the ground is like pretty much on Signy too, with sort of the gneiss and the lots of lichens around. This pretty much predominated a lot of Signy terrain for us. No flowering plants. Quite a few other bird species there, giant petrels. Signy had 10% of the world's population. Unfortunately, these birds are in decline now. And lots of seals, elephant seals, fur seals. These now, when I was down south, we had around, the numbers were steadily increasing, going up to around 10, 11,000 when I was down south in the early 80s. But recently, the numbers are reported at 20,000. So with the stresses with finding food further north around South Georgia, the fur seals are actually heading further south. And these guys, these are probably the apex predator down there. This is a leopard seal. They would feed off penguins. quite massive, quite reptilian looking seals, but these things can go up to 16 feet. You do not want to be in the water with one of these things. And if you're really lucky, you'll also see the odd whale. This is a southern right whale, probably about 60 feet long, something like that. The tail in comparison with a 16-foot long dinghy on the right there. So these were quite rare. I only saw a few when I was down south, but they really are special things to see if you're lucky enough. Now, summertime is a very busy time. We get a lot of visitors. This one's the German research ship Polarstern. This one just, in fact, recently wintered up in the Arctic for quite a while. This was the most expensive ship ever produced by Germany. That's next to the Bismarck, I'm told. So it's going to be going for a number of years, and it's wonderful labs, I've got to say. But they did come into Signy once as part of an Antarctic program they were working on. We used to also get the odd Russian or Soviet trawlers in those days, factory ships that would come and trawl for krill. Tourist boats were also big down there. We used to get quite a few tourist boats appearing for the summer, which we enjoyed because it was an opportunity for us to get some fresh fruit. And occasionally you'd have the occasional daredevil traveler would come in. This guy's popped in to have his keel repaired, having hit a growler. So he stayed for a few days with his family, which was nice. But the real reason for our existence down in the Antarctic was to do the science. And we used to have a number of science programs, terrestrial, freshwater, which I was involved with. We had a marine program, and we did a little bit of meteorology, and we also, the doctor also had a project to do on a human-based project, usually with something to do with the divers we had. We had a diving program down there. So mosses were, back to that. That's good. Yeah, so these two scientists here are looking at the mosses. These were found. These are found on various parts of Signy. They're not all over Signy, but they're very old. Some of them have been dated back to 5,500 years. You know, the bases of the peat underneath some of these mosses, 5,500 years. And it could probably be up to 2 meters thick in parts. Quite a few mosses down there. Vegetation-wise, lichens, mosses, a couple of flowering grasses, and but not a lot else. No trees, no nothing. It's quite barren on Signy. This my colleague here, Neil Fitch, he's looking at invertebrates. There's a lot of invertebrates, quite hardy invertebrates, quite a few mite species. There's tardigrades and springtails. There was also a fly colony that has established itself for a few years and developed the vestigial wings became dominant for a while, but that's certainly, that was not a native species. But springtails, tardigrades, and mites tend to be the most prominent invertebrates you'll find on Signy. Quite a lot of the research we did in my time there was on supercooling. In fact, these animals would essentially freeze themselves to survive the winter and then thaw out and lay their eggs in the spring and develop, and they could live quite a few years, in fact, living like that. So a lot of good research there. Animal life, bird ringing, seal ringing, and my interest, lakes, freshwater lakes. This is Emerald Lake. and you get some idea of the size of the sort of lake we're dealing with. Fairly barren landscape it's in, but tremendous place to work, I've got to say, too. This lake, one of the largest, probably 14, 15 meters deep, something like that. But generally, lakes would vary in depth and size, with the shallowest being down to 2 meters. This is myself in my hairy days when I used to have hair. And I'm sampling core material. I'm coring the sediment in one of the mesotrophic lakes on the east coast. You can see in the background I've got seal for company, so I had the odd hazard to deal with. Generally it wasn't a problem, but I was awfully worried in the middle of a lake sometimes with an inflatable boat and a seal swimming around me. So particularly one with teeth. We also had a diving facility. Being a biological station, we were very well equipped, and we had a full marine science lab, and we had professional divers, or a professional diver. A number of us also were divers, including myself. And we conducted underwater research, if you like, in both freshwater environments and marine environments. This is in a freshwater lake, doing some moss, some algae sampling, in fact. And some areas of research were up in the hills, very difficult to sample sometimes. And luckily we got some help again from the Navy to have a look at a lake in the mountains that we did not have a chance to look at that frequently. So on this occasion, we actually had a chance to fly some divers in and actually have a look at, have a very good close look at the lake. A marine program, lots of marine life there. We used to, for any divers amongst you, we used to use twin hose demand valves and wetsuits. Today, divers are equipped with much more sophisticated equipment and dry suits. Antarctic ice fish here. And eventually, summer goes on, comes to an end, and it's time to say goodbye to the last boat of the season. This is probably towards mid to late March, and it was tradition to send the last boat off with us all lined up on a cliff, firing off flares or whatever. And that's when you realize that you're going to be alone for quite a few months. But that's fine. Things start to change quite rapidly around this time. Still a few penguins around. They will disappear north in time. And also the sea around us begins to freeze. And it's also time to get our boat out of the water, otherwise it'll get crushed eventually. So we'll take the summer dive boat out for storage in wintertime. Temperatures drop, pancake ice is formed. And eventually it gets to the point where it consolidates that it's almost time to, you're almost able to walk on it. So we draw straws out of a hat, and one of us gets a chance to check the walkability of the ice, usually done with what's known as a bog chisel, 3 thwacks with a bog chisel, and it's usually quite safe to walk on. If you get it wrong, you're in. And this also, some of you may have heard of this. It's quite famous in Antarctic circles. It's the Signy thin ice race, when the ice is not quite thick enough to safely walk on, but you can walk in parts. And because we have a dive facility and with wetsuits, we're able to conduct what's known as a Signy thin ice race, and which is a lot of fun. at that intermediate period, and we usually set up we had a setup where you ran from A to B to C in a race, and you could get up to some various antics, jumping in front of the guy in front of you, for example, to get him to fall in. And anyway, a lot of fun, but very cold. And it also is an opportunity at the ice edge to do some good research work before the whole sea freezes. But it's also a chance to have some fun also on the ice edge, relatively safe. So this colleague, he's got no weights on his belt, as you may notice, and he's standing upside down in the ice. Something that a very unusual feeling, but we would often play a game of underwater football under the ice, which is a lot more difficult than you think, but a lot of fun too. But the sea eventually does freeze, and you're able to walk around on the sea ice, which makes getting to your various workstations a lot easier, and also gives us a chance to explore a little more about the environment, a little more of the environment around us too. So our maritime climate suddenly has become more continental climate, and sea freezes, icebergs freeze into the sea, and it really does take on Antarctic winter temperatures. Temperatures could go down to as low as -40 or thereabouts, so which is quite a change from the summer time we had down there. But it really is quite a beautiful period, the winter. Getting around, if you don't get around by skidoos, manholing, or your feet, this is off for a trip to Coronation Island, across the sea ice. And this gives you some idea, this next picture gives you some idea of what we were living on. Signy Island, surrounded by sea ice. Quite a beautiful thing, but you do realize how small it is when you see it from a distance. And the base is just visible on the left there. So we do a lot of good science. We do some traveling around, but the day-to-day life on base still goes on. Water is a big thing down there, even though we're surrounded by snow. We do have to. It's not always readily available, believe it or not, where the base was stationed. But when we had the opportunity, we would supplement our reverse osmosis water system, which would take seawater and purify it. Occasionally that would break down, unfortunately, and we'd have to resort to snow blocking. So each block here would be cut, probably a cup of tea's worth there. So we were restricted with what we could do with water. We were allowed 1 shower a week is what we were usually aiming for. So power showers were definitely out down there. And occasionally, if snow would be a problem, we used to supplement our water supply with the nearby glacial water. We'd go cut ice, or if we're very lucky, get ice blocks from the shoreline to use. In the summertime, we'd have runoff from the hills, and we'd have a big fresh water tank there. The medical side, we had a doctor who was also in charge of doing the dentistry work too. So we really did have to look after ourselves. Unfortunately, it was usually the doctor that had to be patched up in the end. He was the one with most free time in his hands, and normally he was the one that had to get patched. But it's all very basic. So midwinter, 21st of June, is the big time for us. So it's complete opposite from the northern hemisphere. So this is the time when the sun comes back. It's a time for us to celebrate. So we usually put down tools for up to a week. Any research that cannot wait is done, of course. But normally that's our holiday period around winter time. So we usually have a big celebration. We exchange midwinter presents. These are really skillfully made gifts that you know, they're all put into a box selected at random, and you know, usually you will get a nice souvenir of your time south. Some of these you'll notice, you may notice they're actually made out of, these are actually made out of whalebone. Signy being an old whaling station, you can still find bits of whalebone around the base, and that's often used for making things, or used to be used for making things. Might be a little different today. You might celebrate with a barbecue outside on the sea ice. A little bit of fishing, perhaps. Looking for Antarctic cod here to supplement our stores. We might go skiing. All good fun. But science does go on. This is out in the field hut in the west coast. I was out on the west coast doing a survey of lakes, winter lakes, and we also used to do some diving in winter. Glorious time, very cold, either in the marine side or on here, as in here, the freshwater side. And it's quite beautiful underneath the ice. Everybody, all the dives are, of course, have to be roped together, and there's always somebody on top of the surface to raise the alarm if there was a problem. Around August time, the Weddell seal pups are born. Fantastic period. Still very cold, but beautiful, beautiful animal. It also means for us, things are beginning to change on Signy. Cold weather's still there. It's perhaps not as cold as it used to be, but certainly cold enough to crystallize boiling water if you throw it up in the air. So really quite a serene place at this time of year. Anytime between the end of August and end of September, it really is a beautiful, cold, serene, peaceful time to be down there. But all good things come to an end, and springtime eventually comes along, and the sea ice begins to break up. Now, this is actually one of the most dangerous periods of your time in the Antarctic, because a lot of these flows can be easily blown away by wind action and currents. And a number of people have been lost over the decades. Occasionally, I'm glad to say, have just been carried away on sea ice that's breaking up. So this is a time where work becomes very difficult. You can't actually walk over the sea ice to your various scientific stations. You can't take dues easily, and getting anywhere is very fraught with difficulty. It is certainly means times are changing, and it also means that the summer is on its way. And we're just celebrating here, waiting the end of winter and the beginning, waiting for winter to end and the summer to begin, and the whole process to start again. So I'm going to end on that one. I hope I haven't run over my time here.
Oh, no, not at all, Mark. Thank you very much for that.
I had to lose half the slides, Andrew.
Oh no! You can never have enough penguin photos in my experience of.
Now you tell me.
Yes. So, well, thank you very much for that, Mark. Sort of excellent overview. Wonderful pictures. And of course, there's always the infamous midwinter celebrations. I've heard about a few things that go on down in Antarctica, and I'm sure these things are wildly exaggerated. But
I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't bet on that. So yeah, but I've left you with hopefully I've left you with a flavour of what life was like on Signy Island in the early 80s. Not a lot. It was pretty much the same sort of traditions and everything else. A lot of the traditions we used to have were based on naval traditions, and they pretty much stayed throughout the 80s and all the way up to really up to modern days. A few of the traditions I understand are still there. A few things have gone, like the Signy Thin Ice Race, etc. For example, because it's no longer a wintering station. But anyway, hopefully you've got some gist of what went on. Life really was quite challenging at times. Everybody had a job to do, not just your scientific job, but you also had a job looking after your colleagues too. It was a mixed crew. We'd probably have 30–40% of us would be service folk, the radio op, the doctor, the electrician, diesel mech, and maybe up to quite a few scientists, but we wouldn't have been able to do it without all the support personnel that came with the package. So
no, all very, very impressive. Yes, so I suppose we'll just open it up for questions. Does anyone have any questions in particular for Mark? Oh, there's Stuart. You're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yep. Go ahead, Stuart.
What was the basis of the research? What did you discover? Tell us something exciting that you spent all those years down that we've benefited by.
Well, in fact, I was involved on the lakes side, and I was part of the bulk of my work was a long-term program looking at freshwater lakes nutrient cycling, basically. Mm-hmm. And this project went on probably 33 years. People were monitoring lakes chemistry, and really, I guess from 1980, really started to focus on nutrient recycling in the lakes, and that went on probably for 15 years. So it really was a long project. It was eventually written up in the around 2002, 2003, and what it produced was actually it gave a good picture of what had been going on for the last couple of decades before then. So really looking at these polar lakes, they were a good means of a good means of looking for changes. And I understand that the lakes data set that was produced from 1980 all the way up to the mid-90s was actually one of the best environmental data sets for the Southern Hemisphere for lakes. And there were changes in physical changes in the lakes, in the chemistry, and also with the flora and fauna that lived in the lakes. Because we used to monitor not just the chemistry, but we also had a look at the animals that lived in the lakes. And things like brine shrimps, for example, or copepods, or these things we used to monitor these as well. limited things. So really, it was a way of looking at change. And if you combine the lakes data with other data, like Met data, for example, not just on Signy, but other bases around the peninsula, in fact, it really was a good means of seeing change.
Okay. Lovely. We've had another question from Ellie, who says, "Nice to meet you and to hear about life on Signy Island. Is there anything you didn't bring to the island that you wish you had, or anything that you wish you didn't, you brought back that you didn't?"
Well, so I wish I'd brought some things I brought down with me. I wish I didn't. Maybe I'll tackle that one first. I know that wasn't asked, but the one thing we were encouraged to do was bring back, bits of yourself, or bring down to Signy bits of yourself. So, old slides or photographs or whatever. So they were quite entertaining during winter time. We probably found out a little too much about each other down there as well from those sort of things. We used to have what was known as the Monday slide show, and that was a good way of getting to know each other and everything else. What did I not bring down? That's a very good. There's a lot. I've got to say, it's a long time ago. That's almost 40 years ago. I wish I had taken down with me a better appreciation of the history of the Antarctic before I went. So I finished my HND at the time, as it was at the time, and I wish I knew more about the history. So that was one regret. Now, I will say we had a very good polar library when I was on Signy, and I managed to catch up when I was down there. As to things on the way, what did I not take? Was that the question? What did I regret not taking back with me?
Yes. What could you have brought back that you didn't?
Probably more photographs. But today, everybody uses cameras for everything. There, in those days, film. We used to use rather expensive film, and you didn't take so many pictures. I did come back with quite a few pictures, but I probably wish I'd taken a few more.
Lovely. I've got a more we've got a few more, but I'll chip in with the scientific one. Am I right to believe that there are fish in these freshwater lakes at the top of the hill? And if so, how did they get there?
There are fish at the top of the lakes. Sorry.
Are there fish in the lakes higher up the island?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. There is a lake called. Well, so the answer immediately is no. There are no fish.
Oh,
there was a suspected sighting once, but no fish. Now the Norwegian whalers, they actually use one of the lakes, Pump House Lake, for getting their fresh water, and there was some suspicion for a little while that they may have seeded it with fish. It's something that they did do on South Georgia, but certainly in my day, there was certainly no fish. So the biggest thing you're ever going to find is a brine shrimp, basically, maybe a centimeter in size. That's the biggest thing you'll get.
I suppose it just gets blown in that case.
Well, brine shrimp used to live in some of the lakes, but fish, would have been nice to have fish, but alas.
So something about sort of maybe jobs at the Antarctic Survey. I know one or two friends of mine from Durham have gone on to get places there, but Jenny has asked, how competitive are places at the research station, or I suppose perhaps getting down to British Antarctic territory in general? Oh,
well, it's always been competitive to get any position with BAS. it really depends on what you're interested in. Some bases specialize in certain things. In my case, Signy was a biological station. I will say I had some experience with the Clyde River Board before I joined BAS, which helped my application. That didn't come up in the introduction. Mainly, in all fairness to Alice, she didn't know about it, but that certainly helped my case when I was there. So really, if you're a scientist, terrestrial scientist, today, if you're a terrestrial scientist, marine scientist, microbiologist or whatever, really Rothera would be the place to go. Although you do have, for long-term biological projects, although Signy still operates some terrestrial work, not so much, if any, freshwater work anymore, and seal work they do still on Signy. Meteorology, physics, really you want to head to Halley. Now they're pretty much suspended at the moment. They've got a skeleton crew, or had a skeleton crew. I still think they've still got a skeleton crew there, but they'll probably abandon Halley again for another winter. This year we got an issue with an ice crack, as you probably be aware of. Geologists, Rothera is probably your best bet. Geologists did have a look at Signy years ago, but it wasn't interesting enough for them. So they abandoned Signy to the biologists many, many decades ago. So I think if you're a geologist, which I assume you are, Andrew.
I am. I do. one day Till may take me down all of these expeditions to go dredging or something.
Right, very good. Do you climb? That's the other thing. If you're a climber, that is a tick in your favour as well.
I've heard about this. Sadly, after a near miss, after a geophysicist and badly belayed, I thought, you know what, maybe not. Yes, excellent. So
actually, on that story, that accident, if a little diversion here, the diver we had, first diver I had when I was down there, 1982-83, he was an ex-North Sea oil diver. And he decided to head to the Antarctic because he felt it was safer, because he had a lot of problems with bits and pieces dropping on top of him when he was working the North Sea. So he headed south and became a polar diver, which he thought was a lot safer. So
excellent. And I suppose there's one last question from Alice along the lines of desert island discs, I suppose. What is your desert island item that you couldn't live live without at the station?
On Signy Island, I would have said a sun lamp. Because Signy, and perhaps I should have said it the earlier days, so Signy, I showed you a picture on a glorious dingle day. That was very, very unusual for Signy. Normally, during the summer, we would have maybe, it would be cloudy for 80% of the time. So if there was, in fact, I'd go back to that one of your earlier questions. If there was one thing I regretted not taking down with me, it would have been a sunray lamp.
Well, excellent. So in that case, I think we'll draw things to a close and say, well, thank you very much, Mark, for coming along and giving us a talk to us. I'm sure a few of us will hang around on the Zoom for a few minutes more, just to have a bit of a chat. Those of you watching via YouTube, thank you very much again for coming along. Don't forget, if you found this entertaining, or you think you have an interesting event you'd like to organise with us, please do get in touch, and we'll see what we can do. And do sign up to be a member. But I think we'll leave it there. So thank you very much again, Mark.
Thank you to yourself, and thanks to Alice for anyway. So a trip down memory lane for me. It was nice looking back at these pictures from all those years ago. But anyway, thanks again for the opportunity.
Lovely.
All right. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your meeting, guys.
Right, yeah. So you can stop the recording now, David, or whatever.
Right. Well, I'll say my goodbyes now. Anyway, thanks a lot again.
Thanks.
Bye.